Last one is going to be in English, okay? So I want you to pay attention. When I started the road to healing, this has been the most changing things, because when we listen to the kids, we get to learn not only more, but this is how we reconcile. They are the bridge for everything that's happening. So please pay attention. And if there is a breakdown with families and everything else, this is where the kids are coming in to let us know, how can we fix it? How can we get better? There were questions earlier that was asked, if we did some damage to the kids, how can we recover? They're gonna let us know. So we're gonna listen to them. They're gonna speak in English. And then at the end, we're gonna do our ceremony and then have like questions. But I'm gonna have them introduce themselves first. I wanna say thank you for taking your time. I know how busy you are with school and everything. And it takes a lot to be part of this and to be the voice, because most of the time, kids your age don't want to share much with adults because you think like we're not listening anymore. So thank you for giving us this grace. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to be able not only, like I said, to teach us, but at the same time, you're helping us to become better. So thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll start with the questions.
Thank you. እንደምን ዋላችሁ? My name is Helena Miscano, and I'm from here, born and raised here. I'm 21 years old, and I'm just grateful to see you all here. Honestly, I never thought I'd see something like this, so I'm very impressed and very proud that our parents and you guys have taken the initiative to learn more and hear us out. It's like a privilege to be here, so thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bethlehem Jonas. I was born and raised here also. I will be 29 years old in a couple hours. I am a teacher at Path Academy, which is a middle school, and I am planning on going into psychology by doing my PhD, so that's why I'm here today.
Salam, salam. I'm a PA student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine on the Swanee campus. I'm in my second year, and just to reiterate what the others have said, I'm really proud of our community for coming together and creating a space for everybody's voices to be heard. Thank you.
So like I said, this is just the beginning. I always end the road to healing by having the kids speak to us. We could come here all day long and say what we want, what we say, conscious parenting, we started it. So the only thing, if I'm asking, open your ears and open your heart just to listen, because we're losing this generation. I have been to so many prisons and I have seen so many of their age group being there lost because we don't listen to them or we don't connect. So this is the gap. And I have gone from state to state and speak to so many of them, and their voice is the same. Because when I was talking to them last time, they said, I'm surprised. They said, we thought it was just this was happening in Atlanta. So no, it's happening all over in the diaspora community. So once again, not only thank you for being here, I really thank you for being the voice. So the first question, and then what I always do, for the other programs that I do, I come up with the questions. With this ones, I don't want to come up with the questions because I want every single question to come up from them, from their heart, so that they can be heard. So every question that I'm asking in here didn't come from me. I gave them some guideline, some guidance, but it came from their heart, what they want to share to all of us. So the questions and the answers are theirs. So let's listen to them. Thank you again for being here. So the first question will be for Betty. So we're talking about trauma and healing. So intergenerational trauma. How does trauma get passed down in Ethiopia and Eritrea families? And what are steps we can take to break the cycle?
So this is a question I have a conversation with my mom about, and it's kind of like the question I want to investigate when I do my PhD. So, growing up, I've experienced a lot of that effects of lack of conscious parenting, where my parents didn't really know what they were doing. I was raised in a single parent household. We were poor, you know, the whole first generation story. And, you know, growing up, I didn't understand why my parents were the way they were. And there was a large disconnect. And I just did not want to build a relationship with them until I got older. And I had to start asking myself, like, why are they this way? Like, what happened, you know? And a lot of your family's history is mister. We don't really know. They don't tell us, you know? And it's a lack of knowing what they went through, and then the cultural differences. And then growing up, you know, I started asking questions about their childhood and their process to getting to America. And, you know, finding out, like, my dad was a guerrilla soldier and, you know, fleeing through refugee camps in Sudan, coming here, starting a life, just acting like nothing happened. And, you know, you come to a country where you don't speak the language. You know, some parents, they may have been educated before. They come to America, your credentials are not, you know, received by institutions here, and you're stuck working these precarious jobs, you know, low income, poverty line, and then you're tasked as starting a family and raising children in a whole new country, different culture, different language. Do they have the time to process? You know, that's what I had to ask myself. Like, they just kept going. And their mental health, I don't think mental health was even discussed as an issue in their cultural norms where they grew up. So they come here and, you know, they're raising us, and while you're raising your children, you may not know it, but subconsciously your trauma is feeding into the way you're raising them and the effects it has on them from the way you talk to them, from the relationship you have with them. You know, like my mom, she was very in the church. Church was that. I feel like our only relationship existed at church. Outside of that, we didn't go do stuff to get to know each other, you know? So it's just like, it was those gaps that were there. And, you know, as we started getting older in our generation, there's a spike in mental health issues that we're seeing today. I know in the church, as a Nessa Abat, you probably hear a lot of stories. And we go through stuff. And my mom always says, she's like, it's like, what's the problem, you know? You have everything you need. And it's just like, I know they experienced something different. War, corrupt regimes, I don't know, you know, way worse than what we have. Our problems is stress at school or relationships, I don't know. But it's just, I always tell my mom something. I'm like, you may chew your food and digest it differently than I do. Like, you may gain 5 pounds, I may not. I'm human, we're different. And it's like, I'm only comparing myself to the environment I grew up in, you know, like, imagine you grow up here and we're being told we need to work hard, go to these good schools, get good jobs, but you're in competition with people who come from rich families, well off, and have connections and resources, and we're just starting from scratch trying to figure it out. Like, can you imagine our mental health and our stress and our, you know, identity displacement? Because like, we come from 2 different areas, and you're thinking like, I'm the first one to try to figure out the steps, and it's so hard because I don't have the person, the parent, to help me get a job, help me with my resume, help me with my homework. And then you're in competition with these people who have that, and it's just like, yes, my mental health is affected in a different setting than yours, you know? So it's just thinking about those and just identifying like our differences and our challenges and just talking about it and creating like an open conversation and understanding from each other. So how to break the cycle, it starts within the home. You start having conversations with your kids. You know, I don't have kids, so I don't know. My mom tells me parenting is not easy, so that's a journey I will find out later. But, you know, as someone who was born in the 90s, I can see like first generation immigrant children from the 80s to, I want to say, early 2000s. We were like the test dummies. That's what I like to call it. They didn't know what was going on. They were figuring it out. Now the parents who just had children after 2000s, they're more aware of what's going on. I see a difference in the parenting, you know. How my cousins grew up is different from how I grew up. So I'm glad that's happening, and you know, you learn from your environment, your community. So as far as breaking your cycle, it starts within the home. Start building the relationship with your kids, start having the conversations, but not from a accusatory, judgmental space, but more of a, how can we connect?
Suja Organic Cold Pressed Juice.
they never cease to amaze me. Every time that I finish this program, I'm just like, my ears are get bigger and bigger so because I need to listen. And I think you touched up most of it, but I think as a question that you have it in, if you want to add, or any of you can jump in on this, there is a cultural stigma, as we said it. Mental health is often misunderstood, as you said it, ignored in our communities, but you started already, Betty, about having that open communication. So if any of you want to add on what the conversation looks like or where should we start? I think some questions some parents ask, we don't even know where to start sometimes. So we may be stuck.
I can touch a little bit on that. You also asked earlier, what do we do when we've messed up our kids? Like, what if we've already placed that trauma on them? What do we do? And to reassure you, you probably have. Everybody has probably inflicted some sort of trauma on their kids. It's inevitable. So it's one thing to let go of that shame, let go of that blame, and to move forward into how can we fix this? Because it happens. You could be the best parent, but you can't control the factors that happen once your kid leaves. Things that happen at school, things that they see on the media. It's just too much. But if you're already willing to hear your children when they say, this affected me when you did this, that's a big deal. Just that acknowledgement. They're gonna be like, and children also have to be willing to listen and understand that their parents are also human. Everybody's human in this experience, and that comes with growth and learning. So that communication, what does that look like? It's up to, I think it's the responsibility of the parent to start that communication. It's tough for children who barely have their voice to say, hey, I felt this way. They might not have those words. They might be biting their tongue their entire lives without you knowing that they've been affected. So if you create a space where they know, hey, this is safe, I think that would be the first start. Okay, go ahead.
Another thing, this is just my personal opinion, we come from a very hyper-religious community. Okay, whether it's Christianity or Islam, we are very integrated in our religion. Our culture stems from that. So if mental health awareness does not exist within the churches or the masjids, it's the stigma there, you know? And I work closely with a priest at a church, and I told him, hey, I'm pursuing my PhD in psychology. And his first reaction was like, why? He's like, no, the church is it. And I was like, but why do you say that? You know, I just want to understand his thought process. And, you know, he walked me through how your lack of a relationship with God is the reason why you experience mental health. And I was just like, that's not the right approach. But I didn't be like, oh my God, I just told him we could learn a lot from each other. Because again, it's that misunderstanding. You know, just because you are, you know, accepting the science of it does not take away from your religious beliefs. Both of them can coexist. I'm not telling you just because someone has a mental health issue, they need to take medication, but it's good to know what your child is dealing with. Is it anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder? You need to know, you know? And that's why medicine exists. And my argument is like, God wouldn't give the people the knowledge if it wasn't meant for us to use it. You know, it's a resource. So it's a lot of those conversations too about the misunderstanding and how to overcome the stigma of it. It needs to be accepted in the places we are the most, which is our religious beliefs. So.
And just to add to what they've said, we don't treat physical ailments like that. We're not like, you know what, you wouldn't have cancer if you went to church. Like, we don't say that, you know? We don't say that about diabetes. We don't say that about anything. So I feel like we need to have that same approach for mental health illnesses as well. Just to add to that.
Very, very valid point. I think it leads to the next question, and then it's not. So how can we integrate traditional cultural, I mean, you guys discussed it, healing practice with modern mental health approach to create solutions that feels authentic?
Touch on this because I'm on my clinical rotations right now at school, and I've been able to do my behavioral medicine rotation. And I felt like that was a very enlightening experience. Because yes, we've become accustomed to the prevalence of anxiety and depression, but seeing patients who have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, those seemed a little bit more extreme to me. But after my experience there, I felt, okay, this is actually happening to a lot of people. They're happening to a lot of people in our community, and they're actually doing well, they're thriving with their medication. It doesn't have to be as scary as we think it is. But the things that we're lacking in this country are things that traditional healing does encompass. There's lack of community spaces. As Abishas, I feel like we do a really good job of saying, come drink bunna, come, let's do this, let's do that. Going to Ethiopia, seeing that community is there, that's a big thing for mental health. That support is going to be a game changer. Like you guys touched on, school can be very anxiety inducing. Maybe it's not war, but the impact that it does on your body, the cortisol release, it could be comparable. But if you have family to come back and talk about those struggles with, they might not be able to take those exams for you, but you can vent and you can talk. There are ways that our traditional healing and modern healing converge. What I'm talking about right now can be also accessed through talk therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. I feel like what we need to work on is being less resistant to either. Let's not be resistant to the traditions that our parents had, but let's also not be resistant to the new methods that we can access today. And we've talked about, with my friends and I, that although therapy might work for our generation, our older generations were actually accessing therapy in different ways that we wouldn't have expected. The music, the art, those were all expressions of deep, deep emotions. Going to church, that's another way. We also talked about gossip with over bunna. We might say, hey, that's negative, but they were actually trying to find ways to normalize things that were happening within the community and saying, this is happening to so-and-so. It's okay if it happens to me or somebody else. So we just gotta be willing to listen and learn.
I also wanted to touch on that. I think as far as things like tzabal and imnets, like we'll apply that, those like cultural and religious practices when someone might be going through a hard time. And I think that those things have value, but I also think even God would expect of us to take action or take initiative on behalf of our own, like ourself. I think expecting God to solve all your problems is like, in a way, it could just, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything because I think a lot of it just comes from like a lack of knowledge, and it's faith, and that's a beautiful thing. But I think he also doesn't like laziness, and I think he wants us to use what he's given to us. And sometimes God doesn't even give you something directly. Like you might pray for a miracle, like there's like a mental illness in my family, for example, and a lot of times, like, you know, they'll just say, oh, God will solve it. But in my mind, I'm like, maybe God's way of solving it is giving you this resource to use, or giving you the knowledge, or someone coming to you, explaining it to you, or that doctor who's willing to help you, or this medicine. Like that is also God answering your prayer. But I think people always expect it to be like this obvious, like you wake up one day and everything's different. But sometimes, you know, you got to do a little work too. God will give you the path, God will give you the motivation, God will give you the resources, but sometimes you have to apply yourself as well. So I don't, I'm a religious person, so I definitely like respect the amount of faith that people, Habesha people have. I just think we can also pair it with, you know, our own sense of initiative.
Yes. Very well said. We just need to listen. I think it leads to the next one, Helena, to you. So how to empathize with generational parents. We could come in and blame all the parents. We can tell them, you don't listen, you don't do this, but how can we better understand and empathize with our parents' struggles? Or some things could be, they don't speak the language. You may not speak, say, Amharic or other languages, but your parents don't know how to speak English, and they don't have the real word to sit down and be able to tell you, I felt, or I don't know what I'm going through. So how can we empathize? Like you guys, can you give us grace?
I could go on and on about this subject. I think I'm quite an authority figure on it. I had a bit of a turbulent relationship with my parents growing up. I had some mental health challenges that I felt I didn't really receive proper support for. So there was a bit of resentment that had built up within me. I'm being very vulnerable right now. But as I grew up, I learned to have grace for my parents through multiple realizations and then actionable steps that I actually took. Like Betsy said, it would be nice if the parents could take the initiative to open up those conversations, but sometimes you just don't have the words or you don't even know what you're doing. All of you guys here are probably equipped to do that, especially after today, but there's parents who wouldn't even like show up to this type of event because they don't see the utility in it. So I think that in those situations, as a child, you kind of do have to take the responsibility to approach your parents and discuss everything. So before I approached them though, I had to realize within myself, one, they did not grow up like me, like not even close. They're from a different generation, from a different environment. Like my dad grew up in Dabark and Gondar, back and forth, and he's, Generation X. So, I sometimes talk to him and I'm like, you didn't have a fridge. Like, how did you not have a fridge? Like your mom really cooked every day? Like that's shocking to me. I can't imagine that. But to him, it's normal. So it's little things like that that really put in my head, like, you are not the same. You can't expect him to think the same, or my mom even. And aside from even environment, we're wired differently. Like Basie said, you might eat something and digest it different than me. My parents handle stress differently than I do. My parents think through situations differently than I do. They emotionally regulate differently than I do. And so it was just having empathy on that level, the same way you would for a friend. I think the main problem between our generation and our parents is the expectation we have for our parents. It's natural to think they're the parent, they should do everything right. They should know how to parent me. They should know how to talk to me. They should know how to calm me down and make me happy, blah, blah, blah. But like, as I approached the age that my parents had me, I just realized like my mom was just a girl. Like my dad was just a guy. Like they were so young. They were just human. Like they were just human. And one thing that I know is almost universal that I've witnessed in the Habesha community is the parents love their kids. Like, it may not seem that way because we might interpret love differently than the way you guys show it, but it doesn't mean your way of loving is less than the way we love. And I think we need to it takes a certain level of humility to admit that, because in a lot of ways we've had to play the parent role because of language barriers or cultural barriers. But I think there is a lot that we can learn from you guys, and a lot that we can, I guess, reframe in our minds. So I know I'm going on a tangent. Like I said, I could talk for hours about this, but yeah, I'm not done. But so I think the first thing I had to do was just realize they're just people. Like this expectation I held them to know how to address every single one of my needs. They provide me with food, water, shelter, and a lot of other things that even I've seen other people didn't get from their parents. And so I acknowledge that, and I learned to appreciate what I did have. Instead of looking at it glass half empty, try to look at it glass half full. That's the first step I'd give to the youth. And then the next step would be to really see, like we touched on earlier, the trauma that a lot of our parents went through that they didn't even really understand was trauma because it was so normalized around them. Like war, poverty, even things like sexual abuse, that's very common in Ethiopia. And so I just feel like those things need to be taken into consideration. Like they didn't grow up with the same stigmas around things that we'd consider trauma that we do. So them yelling at you or dula, it's not seen as trauma. It's just that's normal. My dad would always say, my parents used to hit me so hard. I love my parents. That's what he'd always say. I'm like, I love my parents too, but I didn't like that. But yeah, so just those little differences, I think we need to just understand that they're human. They still love you. They still love you. And with that knowledge, if you are ready to open up to your parents and tell them, what it is you want to hear, and still give them credit for what they did right, because no one wants to be approached being told, you failed, you messed up, you're a failure, you're terrible, you did everything wrong. You wouldn't even talk to your friend like that. So first, approach them with the acknowledgement of what they did do right. And when you start to address what you feel they did wrong, acknowledge that their intention was probably good. I've heard a lot of Habesha parents say this, parents in general, but we're Habesha, say that, I'm your mom or I'm your dad, so I know what's best for you. I only want what's good for you. Why would you argue with me? So acknowledge that while that may be their intention, that may not have been the consequence, that may not have been the result. What they want for you may not always be best because, like I said, you guys are human. So as parents, I think if you want forgiveness, which you deserve, everyone deserves that. So if you expect forgiveness from your children, you have to accept the humility of, okay, maybe I made a mistake, so forgive me. And if they say, yeah, you made a mistake, you should also be able to admit, yeah, I made a mistake. Like if you want forgiveness, you have to be able to admit you made a mistake. So I think that with those two things in mind, as parents, if you're able to listen to your child without feeling like they're attacking your humanity, they're not. Like saying you did something wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a terrible parent. It just means you're human. So I think if we both take the role of humbling ourselves, we can get somewhere. I'm so sorry, that was very long, but
No,
yeah.
it's not. So today, all parents in here, you've just been told that you're human. So accept that. We make faults. We have our weaknesses. They're giving us grace. And they want us to ask for forgiveness. We may not know how to ask it. But I think you touched up so many of it, but I think both of you, I want you to address with it. And I think this question goes really well. One of the things I want to realize when we were talking about preparing for this, we talked about gossip, and they said, we also do gossip, they said. So they do it also between themselves. But for us, especially for the moms, sometimes we think that's the way they come in together and have that healing. But so this one, I love the question that how it's phrased. How can the kids take responsibility for fostering healthier relationship with the parents, even when we feel misunderstood? So who wants to start?
So my journey with building a healthy relationship with my parents took over 10 years, okay? It took a very long time. It started when I was 18. I was 16, very raging. The teenage, if you don't have teenagers, is coming. That era, I don't know who that person was. When I look back, I'm disgusted. But anyways, when you have teenagers, there's something going on. The rage, the hormones, that era is very hard. And that's the time where your relationship with your child is gonna be hard. That is, when you're leading up to that, you need to start building the trust, okay? Or else you're gonna kind of lose them along the way. So, around that, it was a bad era for me and my mom. We didn't really, it was bad. But, around 18, I was like, let me be proactive and build an honest relationship with her. I feel like she needs to know what I'm experiencing, the changes I'm going through. I'm going from a child to an adult, and I feel like she needs to hear what I have to say, why I act the way I act, the choices I make. And, at first it was very one-sided. This was my expectation for you. You didn't meet it, you failed it, get out my face. It was that. And I was like, okay, if that's the case, I won't put the effort in. But, it was a period of time. I didn't talk to my mom for almost 2 years to teach her a lesson. I wanted her to listen to me for so long. I just felt like space would help her learn, and it was very hard, and it's crazy, to tell people. I don't like to talk about it, but we're in a safe space. So I had to do that, and I had to pray over the 2 years that she would reflect and think about what I have to say. And after 2 years, we had a really deep conversation, and it worked. Over the 2 years, she reflected, she changed, she asked for advice from people. She did the work on her own. I felt like I was there pushing her, forcing her, trying to change her, but she had to change on herself. It's just like any humans, even your children. You could tell them do A, B, C, D, they're gonna do what they want. They have to go through life experience and change on their own. So, her having the willingness over time to change herself and being open and receptive to receive the feedback to change worked in our favor. And here we are 3 years later. That's my best friend, So, yeah, it's just, when it comes to building healthier relationships, you need that sense of trust, the lack of judgment there. And I know the expectations my mom had for me. She probably wants me to do, I was the first born in my family, in my bloodline, in America. I'm the real crash dummy, test dummy, okay? I'm, what do they call it? Ground zero, test trial number one, patient zero, that's what I am. So being the first one born, my mom had to figure out everything how to raise a child in America. Now my cousins, they go to prestigious schools. The parents learned, okay? The uncles and the aunts, they took note and they applied. So for us, it was a different story because I felt like I was the research study, what they can learn from. And it's just like, I was being compared to other families where both parents were educated, their children got to this place, or I don't know, there was just always so much comparison. I just tried to explain to my mom, I'm like, we came from a different background. How do you expect me to get there? I'm still trying to figure myself out, And being a child of a single parent, the pressure on you is a lot. I had to do everything, I felt like I was my mom's right-hand man. I was telling him the other day, when I was 7 years old, I remember calling T-Mobile and arguing with them, like, why is my bill so high? Because I was going off on the people, and I'm 7 years old. They were saying my mom's name. They're like, is this so-and-so? I was like, yes, it is. Yeah, what are you talking about? So it's just like, it's so much responsibility that falls on you. And, you spend so much time invested in your parents', trauma and struggles that you lose identity of yourself. I got to a point where I got older, I'm like, who am I? What do I want to do in my life? I didn't know. And that combined with mom's expectations for myself, I didn't even have an answer for her. I was like, I don't know, and I felt like those 2 years apart helped both of us reflect on both ends, and then come together and then communicate effectively. And now she's a mental health advocate, She was like, yeah, so-and-so family told me their child is experiencing this. You should talk to them, give them awareness. I'm like, see, I taught you well, Yeah. And just like anything, changing one person has influence, her being knowledgeable and accepting now, she went and told her other family members, her friends, yeah, psychology, Betty's teaching me about that. Let me tell you something. She's telling them about how to parent better or what not to do, especially with her best friend's kids, their babies. Oh my gosh, she's coaching the parents. I'm like, this is crazy. But where was this when I was a kid? She was like, stop, I'm learning. She was like, you're the teacher's teacher. She always tells me that. And I'm just like, I like that. And yeah, it's just, you may have to take the space away, let things cool down. 2 years is excessive, but you do what you got to do to build a relationship with your kids, And I suggest you do it before they hit the rage, before 15. But yeah.
I don't think we can hear this and then just continue. This is deep. And how many Betis are out there right now? Right now. Betty had to go through that and say, I'm patient zero. That has to hurt. But we have no excuse. Now we know the Betis. They are telling us the stories. This is why I want to do this, so that we don't just say, I don't know. Her mom didn't know. How old did you say you are?
29.
29. So 29 years ago, we could say maybe her mom did not know. But right now, at this moment, there are so many Betis, there are so many patient zeros. And hopefully maybe some of us in here are those parents and putting our kids through those patient zeros. Please, after we go out of here, let's just listen to this and become, we ask, we learn, so that we don't have another Betty that has to go through it. And through grace, she's here saying, giving forgiveness and having that relationship and calling her mom best friend right now. But how many are run away, they never want to talk to any of their parents? So this is not unique, but the result is very rare. So let's not make it rare. Okay, so thank you, Betty, for being that vulnerable. And I want to cry with you right now because this is just really hard touching. So I'm sorry that you had to be that patient zero.
It's okay, but I went through that, so I feel like I want to dedicate my life to psychology, counseling psychology, not to do the research on what happened. I know that, but to collect the data and create interventions. If lack of quality jobs is the problem, let's create interventions where you guys can learn how to speak English or get a grant to pay for a certification you can get to get you a better job, or learn how to use technology. Just basic skills that can take you a level higher in society and integrate you better into the American society. So instead of just thinking about the past and all that, I'm thinking about what can be done in the future for the coming generations. So for me, it ignited something in me. Like, I don't like to sit in my trauma. I like to transmute it into something, you know? So, but yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But it's a long journey. It's not easy, and you have to really have a forgiving heart and be open-minded and understanding. But you really have to walk in the path of God, really, you know? But
Amen. Thank you. Who wants to add to this?
I think I'll add.
Yeah, okay.
Building on what Beatty said, I think as far as us as children taking accountability, like I said earlier, forgiving, setting our expectations somewhere reasonable, seeing our parents as human. But on the other side of the coin, I think as parents, we need to, set our expectations for children at a fair place. Because like Beatty said, she did not have the resources and the opportunities that, I guess the result that was expected of her would warrant. Like if they're expecting you to go to Harvard, you need Harvard level tutors, you need a Harvard, I guess like elementary, middle school that like sets you into those places. And as someone who went to a school where it was the biggest feeder school to Yale, so most of the Yale students came from my high school, those people are very, very privileged. They have things that I never dreamed of having, and it's just not a fair amount of, I guess, a burden or pressure to put on kids, especially because I would say most of us do feel indebted to our parents, and not just that, we feel indebted to our family back home. I know that's a concern a lot of parents have. It's like, who's gonna help my parents, my cousins, my siblings back home when I'm gone or when I'm old. But a lot of us do feel that responsibility to help our family back home because we are also privileged in the way that they aren't. But taking all that into account and then taking all your parents' hopes and dreams, trying to live vicariously through you, it's a lot. So I think both of us need to be fair with what we expect from each other, and we need to be able to communicate that without it feeling burdensome or it feeling like, if you don't do this, you're a failure and you mean nothing to me, from both sides. And so I think that's the first thing. And then as far as feeling misunderstood, if you're trying again and again and you're not getting a response, I think her example, you don't want it to take 2 years, but for a lot of parents, it might end up being that way if you don't feel the need to listen to your kid. And I understand that a lot of parents believe that they know best, like I said, for their kids. And in a lot of ways you guys do, and I think as youth we need to respect that, I guess, in our parents. But there comes a time where we're transitioning into adults and we should be made responsible for our own decisions. We should be able to have the freedom to decide, things like where we go to college or if we want to hang out with this friend on this day. I obviously believe there should be measures taken to encourage open communication and safety. So I can say, for example, my mom is not very limiting on where I go. I give her my location. So she knows if I sleep over at, Betsy and I are actually friends. So I'll sleep over at Betsy and Nat's house sometimes. She knows her address. She knows where I am. I'll call her before we go to sleep. She knows, before I leave the house, I'll tell her, and that's fine. I feel like a lot of parents, though, they wouldn't even extend that amount of responsibility to their kids. And that sounds like a small thing, but it does build up over time. If you aren't letting your children make their own decisions, they will never feel accountable for their own successes or their own failures. And then you grow up with a 25-year-old child. They're still dependent on you. They can't do anything. And a lot of you guys are approaching, retirement, or at least at the point where you don't want to work the way you used to when you had young kids. But we need to be preparing children to be adults. We're not raising children to be children. We're raising children to be adults. So as long as you can first establish an open line of communication with your child and ensure that they trust you, and in order for us to trust you guys, we have to be able to trust you with information that you won't go crazy over the smallest thing. So, let your kid feel the freedom to tell you about, when it's age appropriate, but even their relationships, like a boyfriend or girlfriend. If someone's like 22 years old, they should be able to date, you know? So those types of things. And even if they're not doing well in school, like they should be able to tell you, hey, I'm not doing so good in school, so that you can help them out with like maybe lowering their course load or whatever the case is. Like we should be able to tell you guys when things are hard. And because if we can't tell you the small things, we can't tell you the big things. And so make sure that I guess you can keep a level head with all types of information from your child, and then they'll feel like they can trust you. And if they feel like they can trust you, they can make their own decisions because you trust them as well. So I just really think a lot of parents need to like pull the reins back, let the kid explore. I know that this country is still foreign for a lot of you guys, and you don't trust the people around here. But as long as you set your kids up with the right principles, and they know that they can call you for anything, and they have a community of friends or family friends that you know and you trust, they'll be okay. Like, they'll be okay. And as long as they know they can call you, they will be okay. So I just hope that that gives you guys some advice, and that also gives advice to the youth who are listening. And back to what I was saying earlier, if the parents aren't ready to take an initiative or be proactive enough to start an open conversation with you, it is worth it, I think, if you were able to forgive them, to approach them, to have that conversation. Because like Beatty had that conversation with her mom, I had that conversation with my parents when I was 18 or 17. And I still remember it. I'm 21, but I still remember it because it was like a breakthrough conversation where I got everything off my chest that I've been holding in for years. And they were very open to listening because I was able to tell them, I know that you didn't mean to do this. I know that you did your best. I know that this isn't how you grew up. I know that this might have hurt you. Like, whatever the case is, I forgave them, and they knew it wasn't from anger, it wasn't from hatred, it wasn't from resentment. It was just, I want to get this out so we can move forward. So I really urge all the kids to take that initiative to do that, and I urge the parents to listen, to really listen. It's okay that you messed up. It doesn't make you a bad person. Just, have that humility. But yeah.
Like I said, this message was for us, the parents, and also the youth, because that balance that you gave us, really appreciate that. But this is a tough question. I think I want you all to answer this in a way. I could start as I say, I'm Ethiopian, so I don't want to lose my religion. I don't want to lose my heritage. But I know you live in America, but I like it, I don't like it. I don't want you to grow up on how. So how can I balance raising you in America without losing my heritage, my root, all of that, so to balance it without feeling like I'm pushing you away or forcing you to it? How can I balance that? Maybe I'll start with you and then we'll go through it.
I've had those same questions that I've asked myself. For a while there, I was embarrassed when I would travel to other countries and be like, yeah, I'm American. I was ashamed of being American because of the views of what America is like. Oh, there's gun shootings. Oh, there's mental illness. Oh, they're all fat and lazy, or they don't respect their parents. I was like, I don't think, I'm Abasha, I'm Ethiopian. Like, I was very proud of the heritage I came from. And I think I have to attribute that to my mom, who, people ask her when we go to Ethiopia, like, they eat what? They do this, they do that. They're like, how did you do that? She's like, that's all I knew. What else was I gonna teach them when we came to America? I'm an Abasha myself. That's all I could show my kids. And so I really appreciate that she upheld those traditions. But one thing I had to change was that mindset about being American. I had to let go of that and recognize that it's a privilege to be here. It's a blessing to have the resources and access that I have. And realize that I probably wouldn't be the same person that I am. I probably wouldn't have the same thought process that I do have because of the environments that I've been open to. I feel that I feel comfortable speaking, being outspoken, and being a female in sometimes majority male-dominated fields. I might not have had those same experiences if I were in Ethiopia. But there are definitely challenges being an immigrant, as many of us can relate to, like coming to a new country, especially as a kid. My name is Bez Anat. Who can say my name? I went through so many nicknames, so many to this day that I still endure. But recognizing our heritage and appreciating that is one thing, but then also understand and finding places in America that feel safe and welcoming. It might not be with other Abishas, but it might be with other immigrants who have migrated from other countries. I feel a lot of relatability in those spaces. But yeah, that's for me.
For me, growing up, my mom had 3 very important pillars in our household. Bahal, Kwankwa, Haimanot. Okay, it was on the wall. We had to. I speak Amharic fluently. I'm invested in my religion, and I love my culture. You know, it's almost like I was born in Ethiopia, and that had trouble growing up. Okay, I didn't speak English until I got to kindergarten, so I was in ESOL for a very long time. But I don't regret it. It made me who I am. I love Habesha music more than American music. My friends get in my car, I'm listening to Habesha music, and they look at me like, can you change that? I'm like, no, we're gonna vibe, you know? So it's just like, it made me who I am. Like, I'm so invested in who I am. I always thank God, thank you for making me Ethiopian. I appreciate it. Like, we have so much rich culture for it to just be forgotten, you know? And from the way we interact, the way we eat, the process, when you go to even weddings, graduations, them cutting the cow mid-vent, you know, all that it's just little things, you know, little things that just makes us who we are. And I want that identity. I'm so happy, you know, my mom did that. And my friends always be like, you're so lucky your mom taught you that. Like, I wish I spoke Amharic, or I wish I did this. And I'm just like, it's not too late, you know? And it's just, when we went to Ethiopia, like, we were so, you know, fluent in the language and everything. My family was like, how'd you do this? And like, how'd you learn English? To my mom, she's like, oh, I didn't learn English. I sacrificed. And it was like, but don't you need it if you're living in America? She's like, that's don't worry about that. And I was just like, you know, you should have focused more on learning English and adapting yourself to American culture. But she didn't care about none of that. As long as me and my brother embodied our roots. And you know, over the years, I'm like, okay, so how can I help her? So it's small little things, you know. I started making her listen to music that are by Habesha artists, like The Weeknd, Nipsey Hussle and stuff. And it's like bridging the gaps very small, like putting her onto American culture that are Habesha first, and then we're working our way. And it's just like, we talk about everything, you know. She's like, she'll see something on Facebook, she's like, yeah, I just saw something about Drake. And I'm like, how do you know that? She's like, I learned. And I'm like, so I see her doing her own research too when it comes to like understanding American culture. Because, you know, for us, music plays a huge part. We love music. It influences our fashion, the way we talk, especially in Atlanta, where like, this is like the culture mecca for Black people. Let's just say that. The fashion, the music, everything is influenced by Atlanta culture. And I know you may not know that, but to the rest of the world, everybody knows about Atlanta. So, you know, just helping my mom understand that, I'm like, we live in the best part, you know, and it's just integrating her into the American culture and the music and the fashion and stuff. Even when my brother grew dreads or locks, she was like, what is that? And then he was like, everybody has it. And she was like, you know what, I'm gonna let you go through your phase. And she let him, he cut it off, and she's like, see, I learned. And I was just like, but yeah, I mean, it's a two-way street. You know, you teach them about your culture, let them teach you about their culture. And we learn culture from our environment. If your school is all Black people, you're gonna be listening to rap, talking like them. If your school is all Hispanic, you're gonna take on after them. It just depends the environment you're in that influences who you become. So for me, I grew up around mainly Hispanic and African Americans. So my background, you know, is very heavy in Black culture too, while also having my Habesha identity. While I listen to Habesha music in the car, around my friends, we're listening to the rappers, you know, and we're just having fun and singing the lyrics. And it's just like, that's not the life I grew up, but this is my culture. I'm gonna sing the lyrics. So yeah, I'm sorry if I got long-winded, but it's just intersections, cultures.
I just have a quick thing I wanted to add. I feel like their answers were very comprehensive, but I think that I always tell my dad when we just talk about, me and my dad are very close, so we just be talking, but we'll just talk about things, and something that comes up in a lot of our conversations, and I'll tell him, is like, there are a lot of beautiful things about Ethiopian culture and the way that, and I'm not talking about like the dance, the music, the food, that's all amazing. Like there's no advice for that, that's perfect. But in terms of how we engage with one another, there are things that I think that are very beautiful and respectable about Ethiopian culture, but I also think the same of American culture. And so sometimes I feel like Betsy said, there is like a shame that comes with being American, or it's like stigmatized if we act American. But I think having some open-mindedness and understanding that the way you grew up doesn't mean it's right, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just isn't automatically right. From both sides, we would help us like integrate the best parts of both cultures. So I would say, I guess a more minor example would be Hazan. The way Ethiopians conduct like mourning and funerals is very different. It's very different. And it's kind of unusual for like us to see that, because it's like, whoa, what is this? But that is very normal for you guys. And I don't think either way is right or wrong. I think in Ethiopian culture, it's very community oriented. They're very open with their grief. They're very vocal about it. It's all about comforting each other and coming together for the deceased. And I think in our culture, it is more, private, and it's more personal. And one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's just whatever is comfortable for you, what works for you. But I have heard at funerals of people like my peers, I know some people whose parents have actually died, and people would say things like, they're not even crying. Do they even care? And it's like, that's their mother, like that's their father. I'm sure they are grieved. But that's what I'm saying, it's the judgment. I think we can both try to reserve our judgment and understand that just because something is different from our culture, it doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. And there are some things that, might be a little better in one way, better in the other way, but overall, neither culture is necessarily like more moral or correct than the other. We just should take the best parts of both and try to integrate them into our lives and have an open-mindedness and understanding for one another's culture.